Hey everybody, what's going on? So in this section, we're going to talk about your sales interview process, okay? And specifically, we're going to be covering the first interview. So this is when you're going to be talking to, let's say, a recruiter, a manager, or someone to first screen you over the phone. And I'm going to show you how that first phone call works, what to do, what to say, so that you can move further down in the recruiting process so that you can actually get a high-paying sales job. So we're going to call this interview number one. It's the phone screen. And typically the first interview is going to be done in 30 minutes with a recruiter, sales manager, sometimes a senior account executive, or even a founder if you're starting or applying to a startup. The goal is for this particular interview is that the employer is trying to see if they like you and if you are a good fit to work at their company, right? And once you get past the first phone screen, you're going to move into interview number two, where you're going to meet other team members and you're going to have a more in-depth interview. But before you even get there, obviously, you got to get through this 30-minute interview, which a lot of people struggle with. And just understand that on interview number one, they're not going to give you a job offer right off the bat, because typically, if you're trying to get a job at a good company, they're going to spend a lot of time on recruiting to make sure you are a good fit. And from my experience, people really look for culture fit, especially the good companies, and they look for competence, okay? So what I mean by that is culture fit, if you can do all the work and you're competent and you can learn, great, that you check one box. But at the same time, they're also looking to see, if they like you as a person, if your values matches their company values, because if not, then they are not going to hire you, even if you can do a great job. So culture fit, very important. Now, here is what you're going to do so that you can crush your sales interview. The first question that recruiters usually ask over the phone is, tell me about yourself, okay? So, pretty much in almost every interview I've been in, they always say this, tell me about yourself. They want me to start things off and they want to see, how I begin the conversation. Now, this can be a little bit of a trap, because sometimes when we're not prepared for this question, we just start talking about our school experience, our work experience, and why we want to be in this job. And, it's kind of boring and you end up like everybody else. So this is what I did during my recruiting process to differentiate myself from everybody else and to really stand out. So when they tell me, tell me about yourself, Patrick, I'll typically say, sure. Now, there's a lot of different ways I can start, and there's a lot of things I can tell you about myself. Is there anything specific you would like to know about me? So this is a very powerful question that a lot of people don't use, so it's a little bit of a hack for interviews. And the reason I do this is because when people tell me about myself, it's like, I always feel like they have a certain expectations of what they want me to say. And so they're just trying to see if I tick all their boxes. But I'm not really a mind reader, so I don't know exactly what they want from me. So if I just start talking about my school experience, maybe that's not what they want to hear. And I just spend 10 minutes talking about something irrelevant to the job interview, right? So that's why I always ask, is there anything specific you would like to know? And if they have something specific, like they'll start with, tell me about your work experience, tell me about the last job you were at, then I can start in a place where, they're directly asking me a question and I can fulfill that answer appropriately. Now, if they don't have anything specific, which is very common, they'll say, okay, well, you can start anywhere you want, right? So usually if they don't have anything specific, and this happens more often than not, they'll just say, you know what, just start anywhere you want, Patrick, anywhere, right? And that's really good for me, because what I'm doing is I'm asking if there's anything specific they want to know about me, they'll say, you can start anywhere you want. And what I'm doing is I'm getting permission to talk more freely and break out of the typical boring interview conversation. So that's the whole goal of, countering the idea of when a recruiter asks you, tell me about yourself, because you want to take control of the interview conversation. You don't want it to be like them asking you questions and you answer and just goes back and forth, because that's boring, right? And you just end up like a candidate like everybody else. And you do not want to be like everybody else if you want to be competitive in the job market, right? So what I do is I get this permission to talk about anything I want, and then from there, I start to do something a little different. And what I do is I will tell them my values and what I believe. And this is basically the differentiation factor that I was able to use during my time when I was applying at Oracle and all these different places. I tell them my values and what I believe. I don't tell them exactly what I can do, my past experience. I tell them what I believe, because that is my true character And again, they're hiring for a culture fit, not necessarily if I have past experience and things like that. So for me personally, right, and you don't have to copy what I'm saying. Everybody has their own values and what they believe in. So I usually start off the interview saying like, so they'll be like, oh, tell me about yourself, Patrick. Where do you want me to start? I can talk about many things. Oh, tell me, starting where you want. And I'll say, okay, great. Well, there's two ways I really live my life, two key principles. Okay. The first one is love and be loved. And the second one is to inspire others. And the reason for that is because, and then I go into this story about why the two key principles I live my life by is love and be loved and inspire others. And so when I say this, it's very interesting for a recruiter because they're like, it's totally unexpected and does show like a little bit more intelligence, right? Because it's like, you're not just answering their questions, but you're taking control of the conversation and you're telling them what you believe. And by doing this, if you feel confident in who you are as an employee, well, people are going to be impressed by your values and your belief, right? And the companies that don't really see this, in my opinion, aren't really the best places to work because they're not looking deeper into the person's personality. They're just looking for a worker. And personally for me, I don't even want that myself. So if they don't hire me based on this factor, then I'm not going to work there, right? But the people that really understand this and they really look for, authentic people who are not afraid to be themselves, it's like a way for me to filter out the bad companies, but also a way for me to raise my hand and stand up for the good companies. And so I go into a story of, when I was younger, I used to be shy and quiet and, I didn't have a good life, but then I learned communication skills and, my life became better. And so now what I'm trying to do is inspire others like you guys, especially the people watching this, to, that anything they want in life, it's attainable if they work hard and they go for it. Like basically I tell a story like that and people are really moved by it, especially if you're an employee and this is what you believe, then they're thinking, oh my God, this guy, he could probably be an entrepreneur if he wanted to, and I can get him as a salesperson, right? Yeah, so I go into why I believe this, and then it impresses them a lot. And the key thing is like people are really more interested in who you are and what you believe, not necessarily your past experience, especially when it comes to sales, especially entry-level sales role, because you got to understand for entry-level, you don't have any skills, you never done this job before, so you don't really have much experience to kind of tell them. Instead, you got to show them that who you are as a person, and you got to make them believe that you can actually get the job done, that you're a good culture fit, and that you're capable of, you're competent to learn anything you need to learn on the job. And this is how you're going to separate yourself from everybody else, especially if you don't have any sales experience, right? Because if you are just graduating from college, or if you worked in another industry and you want to move into tech sales, well, you just don't have any experience, right? Maybe you dealt with people and things like that, but not direct experience. So you got to tap into your beliefs. And this will basically create a halo effect, because if you do this right and you have a great story that's authentic to you, like what do you live by? What is your principles? What do you want to do? And for me, love and be loved, it's had nothing to do with making money for another company. Love and be loved for me is like sharing love with others and having that love returned unconditionally, or not unconditionally, but like you would want it, but you don't expect it. That's how I kind of explain the love and be loved, and inspire others is to help other people and help them achieve their greatest dreams, right? So it doesn't really have to do anything with selling anything, but it's who I am, and people can clearly see that. They can clearly get a picture of who I am and how I will fit in their company. And when it comes to like getting a good sales job, people are they're thinking like, do I want to work with this person, right? And if I feel like if they think I'm a very inspirational person and I can provide like a positive energy into their team environment, yeah, they're gonna hire me. So after that, once you get through your philosophy or life values and things like that, the interviewer will they're going to ask you about your relevant sales experience, right? And, you can't escape this. After you get through your values, you can't pretend like you have sales experience. You don't have any sales experience if you're just getting started, right? So that's why I say relevant sales experience, because it doesn't have to be direct experience. So if you do have relevant sales experience, like you had a sales job before, share the highlights, right? And just go get the best parts and share the highlights. You don't have to talk about all the stuff that doesn't really fit. Share about the things that will impress employers, and I think you have an idea of what that is. Now, if you do not have any relevant sales experience, what you want to do is you want to find examples in your past where you overcame adversity, had to talk your way through a challenging situation, or how you have the mentality where if you don't know how to do something, you will spend time to learn and work hard to compensate for that lack of knowledge, okay? So this is extremely important for anyone who doesn't have any sales experience, especially for me, myself, when I was, in university, I didn't have any sales experience, right? So you got to understand like sales is really just an extension of human communication, right? Because you're just communicating. So if you show someone you are good at communicating, they will get a pretty good idea that you can sell. So in any situation where you overcame adversity, where times were difficult, it could be when you were a leader at a school club, or maybe you had a job that was unrelated to sales, but you had to overcome adversity. That counts. Or any situations where you have to talk through a challenging situation, right? Like let's say you got in trouble by the police and you and your friends were being stupid and you did something wrong, and then you were able to get out of it by using your communication skills, right? But maybe you shouldn't mention anything if you got in trouble with the police, but you know what I mean. If there's a situation where things went south and you were able to talk it through and save the day with your words, that would be a great story to tell if you don't have any sales experience. And the mentality where, you don't know how to do something, but you spend time to learn, that's very important, right? Because in sales, it's like you don't know everything. So it's all about being adaptable to an environment, learning on the fly, and working hard to execute on the things that you learn, right? So if you show them that, then they're going to hire you. Like for me, one example was, I remember I entered a startup competition, and I remember I built my presentation. I did a mock presentation with like an incubator before the real one. And then they were like, oh my God, this idea sucks, Patrick, your presentation sucks, and this and that. And then, in just like 3 days, I put it back together, and then I won third place in the competition, right? And so in that situation, I didn't start out good. I wasn't that great at pitching, but I was able to make some changes really fast based on feedback. And then I was able to win third place in a startup competition where just a couple of days before that, nobody thought I even had a chance. So if you have stories like that, it's not necessarily selling. It's just a startup competition where I'm pitching. It's kind of related to sales. I'm pitching myself, pitching my business idea, but it's not like B2B sales, right? So you got to find relevant experience, whatever it is that you've done in your life. Find experience where you're communicating, talking, going through challenging situations where you have to learn, and people are going to be very impressed by those experiences. Now, near the second half or 3/4 through the interviewer will ask you if you have any questions for them. They always do this. They'll say, they'll be like, okay, Patrick, we learned about you, but now do you have any questions for me? The reason for why they do this is because they want to see how interested you are in the job, what's your competency when it comes to listening and learning about another person. So don't think the interview is over. They're still interviewing you. They're really just evaluating who you are as a person and how you ask questions. So what you want to do is you want to ask questions to get an idea of what it's like to work at that company from a cultural standpoint and a competency perspective, right? Your goal when you're asking questions is to get them to share their experience on how the people are at the company, like culturally, and what's the day-to-day work life like. And then what you want to do is whatever they tell you what it's like to work at that company, you want to make them feel like you are a perfect fit for that company if you want to work there, right? Because again, it's all about fit. People will hire you even if you don't have the competency skills quite yet, if you are a good culture fit. So you need to make sure, if you want a job at a company, that you fit in their culture. So to do this, right, you're gonna ask questions to learn about what their company is like. So you can ask them things like, okay, well, you're asking the interviewer, you're like, why did you decide to work at this company, right? Now they're gonna share their backstory of why they decided to join. Then you ask, what is it like to work there? What is the culture like? What is the day-to-day? Is it long hours? Do people help each other? Or is it very competitive and they don't help each other, right? What is it like? How are the people like? Are they cooperative? Are they hostile? Things like that. What type of candidates are you looking for? Are you looking for someone who's a go-getter and can do everything by themselves? Or are you looking for someone that can fit into a system and optimize it, right? Every company is going to be different and they're going to give you different answers. But the goal of these questions is to get them talking, right? Because the more the recruiter or whoever you're talking to talks about the company, the better idea you have of what they are looking for. That's the goal. What is this person looking for, and do you match that description? So when you ask all of these questions, you're just trying to see like, okay, do I fit into this culture? Because, once you get all this information, what you're going to do next is you're going to explain to them why you are a perfect fit based on everything that they already told you. And that's basically a selling technique, right? You ask questions, you understand their pain to know what they're looking for, and you just happen to be the perfect fit. But you will only know the answer to these questions. You would only know if you are a perfect fit if you ask these questions first. And that's why it's so important to ask these questions to get a really good feeling of what the day-to-day life is like. So towards the end of the interview, you really need to make sure and make them aware that whatever they told you about their company, about culture, the people, and what the day-to-day life is like, you match that profile and you are easily a good fit, and you don't need much work to fit into that puzzle piece. And at the very end of the interview, once you do that, you want to make it clear that you really want to work there and you're a great fit and you want to move on to the next step of the interview process, okay? You don't want to be like, oh, okay, let me know if I got the job, hit me back up, right? You really want to let them know you want to work there, you want to move to the next step. This is very key. This is one of the key lessons I learned when it came to interviewing. Because if you don't show them you care, they're not going to take you as seriously. And don't be afraid that you're too desperate or some people, they're too afraid that they don't want to come off desperate. So they really want the company, but they'll just be like, oh, okay, thank you. And that's it. Show them that you really care. It really makes a difference, right? Obviously, don't be too desperate, but be assertive with it and show them that you want to work at the company. Now, to close out the interview, you want to ask them, just very casually towards the end, and you say, this job seems really great so far. I think I really might be a good fit, but, I was just curious to know, is there any reason for why you might think I wouldn't be a good fit to move to the next stage of the interview process based on everything we talked about so far? And this is a really bold one, right? And you have to ask this one. It's so important. The reason is because most people are too afraid to ask this question because they're afraid of rejection. But if you're not a good fit, you're going to get rejected anyway. So you might as well get this done on the interview, the first one. So you say, look, is there any reason for why I wouldn't move forward to the next stage? Basically, if they say, no, there's no reason, then you ask them, okay, great. Well, what's usually the next step in this process? And they're going to be like, okay, well, we need to set up another meeting with my boss and this and that. And you set up the next meeting, you move to the next stage, right? It's done. You basically just close the interview right there because there's no reason to reject you. Now, a lot of times you're going to get yes. They're going to say yeah, Patrick, you seem really good, but you don't have enough sales experience, but you don't have XYZ, right? And they're going to give you their objection of why they're not going to hire you and why they're not going to call you back for the next stage of the interview. And if that's the case, you need to handle that objection right there, right then. You never want to leave a sales interview not knowing why you didn't move to the next process or why you didn't get the job. You need to know why so that you can improve your interview process for the next person. So you always have to ask this question because if they don't have any reasons to reject you, then you move to the next step. Great, no problem. If they say yes, you don't have enough sales experience, then you say okay, well, I don't have enough sales experience. I totally understand what you're saying. However, and then you tell them a story about why you can overcome it, why you're adaptable, why you can learn on the job, and it's okay you don't have any sales experience, and you need them to take a risk on you because you're going to work extra hard. Whatever it is that you need to say, you need to handle that objection. But if you do not ask this question, you're never going to know why they reject you. So that's why you always have to ask this so that you can handle that rebuttal. Also, even if you don't get the job, even if they don't want to hire you, you know what your weakness is during your interview process so that for the next person or the next company you interview at, you know for sure how to make sure you handle those objections even before you get to this stage during the beginning interview process. So if you're lacking, let's say, sales experience, for example, you want to make sure at the beginning and the middle of the interview that you tell them that you lack sales experience. However, you can overcome that so that you don't have to handle the objection at the very end. So from there, if you handle the objection, they're going to move you to the next step and they're going to tell you what the next steps is, schedule the next meeting. If they say no, you're already good, you move to the next step, and that is pretty much how you close out the first interview. And also a variance of this strategy is before you ask this question, is there any reason for why I want to move to the next stage? You could also ask them, typically what would be the next step in the interview process? You can answer that question first over here. And they're going to say oh, well, next step would be we talk to my manager, we schedule a meeting. You say, okay, great. Thanks for telling me that. Now, is there any reason for why I wouldn't move to the next stage of the interview process? So you can do it like that. That's a more natural transition for a lot of people by asking the steps first and then asking this big question. Or you could ask this big question first and then ask them what the next step is depending on if they do yes or no. Both ways work. Just see which one fits your style more. Now, if you do get past the first interview, some companies will give you sales interview homework, right? They'll give you a situation, they'll give you a product, and they'll be like, okay, write some cold emails, send them to us ahead of time before the second interview. Or you might be asked to prepare for a mock cold call or a mock sales presentation at the second interview where you actually do that thing. So what you want to do is you want to use the knowledge in this course for cold calling, cold emailing, sales presentation. It's all in this course. So just revisit any of the sections that they ask you to do homework in. So if they're asking you to cold email, go to the cold email section. If they're asking you to cold call, go to the cold call section, use my templates, and basically just, replace their product and service with, and put it into the templates, and you're pretty much good to go, right? All you need to do is just use the training that you already learned in this course so that you can complete the homework. It's pretty self-explanatory. And so that's pretty much it. And so when you do the sales interview homework, send it ahead of time when they ask, or just be prepared to do it live on the second interview. And by doing that, that's how you're going to be able to, it's basically like having your best foot forward when it goes into the second interview, because they will judge you based on your ability to write these cold emails and be on the phone and stuff, because that's essentially your job. Now, you don't have to do everything perfectly. You just need to be better than the other candidates. They just need to read the email and see your cold call and be like, yep, this guy's good. He's not perfect, but we can train him to sell in the way we want him to sell. And I see him being a good fit. That's exactly what you want the recruiter to think. And so with that said, that is pretty much how we are going to handle the first interview. So let's go ahead and move on to the next section, where we are going to be talking about how to handle that second interview.